Trump and Barron walk into press room. One reporter changes everything. The room buzzed with the electric hum of anticipation, a hive of cameras flashing and pens scratching, as Donald Trump strode into the White House press room, his youngest son, Barron, at his side. The former president, now in his second term, carried the familiar swagger, shoulders squared, chin high, his golden hair catching the fluorescent lights. Barron, at 19, towered over his father, his lanky frame clad in a tailored navy suit, his expression a careful mask of composure. The press corps, a sea of eager faces, leaned forward, their questions poised like arrows. It was a routine briefing, or so it seemed, meant to address a recent economic policy. But in that room, amidst the chaos of shouted queries and clicking shutters, one reporter, a woman with tired eyes and a notepad worn at the edges, would shift the course of the day, and perhaps, the course of a young man's heart. Her name was Clara Evans, a 42-year-old journalist from a small outlet in Ohio, known for her quiet persistence rather than flashy scoops. Clara had spent 2 decades covering local stories, school boards, factory closures, opioid recovery programs, before landing this White House gig. She wasn't here for fame, she was here because she believed stories could heal, could bridge divides. Her colleagues often overlooked her, their ambitions trained on viral soundbites. But Clara saw something in Barron that day, something no one else seemed to notice, a flicker of uncertainty in his blue eyes, a boy still finding his place in a world that had already decided who he was. The briefing began as expected. Trump fielded questions with his trademark bravado, deflecting critiques of his policy with quips that drew chuckles from some and eye rolls from others. Barron stood silently, his role unclear, perhaps a symbolic gesture of family unity, or a nod to the next generation. Clara watched him, noting how his fingers twitched at his sides, how his gaze darted to the exit. She'd read the profiles, Barron, the enigma, shielded from the spotlight, rarely speaking publicly. Yet here he was, thrust into the circus. She wondered what it cost him to stand there, a prop in his father's narrative. Then came the moment that cracked the script. A reporter from a major network lobbed a barbed question at Trump. "Mr. President, critics say your economic plan ignores the working class. What do you say to families struggling to afford groceries?" The room tensed, expecting a fiery retort. Trump leaned into the podium, his lips parting, but before he could speak, Barron stepped forward. The movement was slight, almost instinctive, but it silenced the room. "Can I say something?" Barron's voice was soft, untested, yet it carried a weight that stilled the clamor. Trump glanced at his son, surprise flickering across his face, then nodded. Barron cleared his throat, his height making him seem older than his years, but his words betrayed a raw vulnerability. I don't know much about policy yet," he began, his voice steadying. "But I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. I've seen people online, regular people, saying they're scared of losing their jobs, their homes. I just think, we should listen to them. Really listen." The room was a vacuum, the air sucked out by his unexpected candor. Clara's pen froze above her notepad. She saw it then, the boy wasn't just a Trump, a name synonymous with power and polarization. He was a young man grappling with a world that judged him before he could define himself. The other reporters scrambled, their questions now aimed at Barron, probing for a crack in the family armor. "Barron, are you saying your father's plan is flawed?" one shouted. "Is this a rift in the Trump dynasty?" another pressed. Barron's face flushed, his composure fraying. Clara's heart ached. She'd seen this before, not in press rooms, but in the small towns she covered, where kids carried the weight of their parents' choices. She thought of her own son, Ethan, 16 and battling leukemia, his courage a quiet fire that kept her going. She raised her hand, her voice cutting through the din. "Mr. Barron," she said, her tone gentle but firm, "you mentioned listening. Can you tell us about someone you've listened to recently, someone whose story moved you?" The question landed like a lifeline. Barron's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the room faded. He hesitated, then spoke. "There's this guy, Mike, who works at our estate in Florida. He's a groundskeeper. He told me about his daughter, Lily. She's sick, really sick, and he's working 3 jobs to pay for her treatment. He doesn't complain, but you can see it in his eyes, how much it hurts. I keep thinking, there's got to be a way to help people like him, you know. People who are trying so hard. Clara nodded, her throat tight. She knew that pain too well, the hospital bills, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing the person who made life make sense. She scribbled Mike's name, her mind already turning. The other reporters pivoted, sensing a story, but their questions grew softer, less predatory. Barron's honesty had shifted the room's pulse, and Clara's question had given him space to breathe. Trump, sensing the moment, stepped in, praising his son's compassion while steering the conversation back to policy. But the damage, or perhaps the miracle, was done. Barron's words lingered, a crack in the polished facade of politics. As the briefing ended, reporters swarmed, but Clara hung back, watching Barron slip out a side door. She felt a pull to follow, not as a journalist, but as a mother, a human. Outside, in a quiet corridor, she found him leaning against a wall, staring at his shoes. "That was brave," she said softly, approaching. "Bar." Barron looked up, startled, then offered a shy smile. "I didn't mean to say all that," he admitted. "It just came out." Clara smiled back. "Sometimes the truth does that." "You meant it, though, didn't you? About Mike and Lily?" He nodded. "Yeah. I keep thinking about them. I don't know how to help, but I want to." Clara hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo of Ethan, his grin bright despite the hospital gown. "This is my son, Ethan. He's sick too. Leukemia. I know what Mike's going through. It's why I asked you that question back there. I saw you, Barron, not the name, not the headlines. You." Barron studied the photo, his expression softening. "Is he okay?" he asked. "Some days are better than others," Clara said, her voice steady but raw. "But he's a fighter. Like Lily, I bet." Barron nodded, then looked at her with a resolve that seemed new, born in that moment. "Can I do something? For Ethan, or Mike, or anyone?" Clara's eyes welled, but she held his gaze. "You already did. You spoke up. That's where it starts. But if you want to do more, talk to Mike. Ask him what he needs. And keep listening." The next morning, Clara's article went live, not with a sensational headline but a simple one: Barron Trump's heart, a call to listen. It wasn't about politics or power, it was about a young man's quiet plea for empathy, about a groundskeeper named Mike and a girl named Lily fighting for her life. The story spread, not because it was scandalous, but because it was human. Readers across the country shared it, their comments filled with stories of their own struggles, their own Mikes and Lilies. Days later, Clara received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was Barron. He'd spoken to Mike, he wrote, and learned that Lily's treatment required a specialized surgery the family couldn't afford. Barron had quietly arranged a fundraiser through a private foundation, raising enough to cover the procedure and more. "I didn't want it in the news," he wrote. "But I wanted you to know. And I'm going to keep listening, like you said. P.S. I hope Ethan's doing okay." Clara read the email through tears, her heart swelling. She thought of Ethan, who'd laughed that morning despite his pain, and of Mike, who'd never know the full chain of events that led to his daughter's chance at life. She thought of Barron, a boy stepping out of his father's shadow, not with grand gestures but with small, deliberate acts of kindness. Weeks later, Clara visited Ethan in the hospital, where he was recovering from a successful round of treatment. She told him about Barron, about Lily, about the power of a single moment of honesty. Ethan, weak but smiling, said, "Sounds like he's figuring it out, Mom. Like you always do." Clara hugged him, her heart full. The world was messy, divided, often cruel. But in that press room, in one fleeting exchange, a spark had ignited. A reminder that compassion could ripple outward, touching lives no one could predict.